A desperate search, a canine team pushing against the brutal storm, finds a tiny, frozen figure. But what the little girl whispers isn't a plea for help, it's a chilling accusation. And the loyal German shepherd, refusing to leave her side, becomes the key to unlocking a terrifying secret hidden deep within the unforgiving wilderness. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The wind howled a mournful dirge, a relentless torrent of ice and snow that swallowed the world whole. It was a sound that had become all too familiar to the canine rescue team from the Whisper Peak Search and Rescue. For 3 agonizing days, they had battled the merciless blizzard that had descended upon the remote mountain community, blanketing everything in a suffocating shroud of white. The temperature had plummeted, turning every breath into a frosty cloud, every exposed inch of skin a canvas for frostbite. Visibility was a cruel joke, often reduced to mere inches, making the search for the missing child, 7-year-old Lily, a desperate, seemingly futile endeavor. Sergeant David Macmillan, a man whose face was etched with the lines of countless searches and silent burdens, pushed forward, his shoulders hunched against the gale. His breath hitched in his throat, a sharp pang of fear twisting in his gut. The silence from the radio, punctuated only by static and the frantic calls of other teams, was deafening. Hope, once a flickering flame, was rapidly being extinguished by the unforgiving elements. He glanced down at his partner, Ranger, a magnificent German shepherd whose thick, sable coat was dusted with a fine layer of snow. Ranger's powerful legs churned steadily through the deepening drifts, his keen nose constantly working, sifting through the icy air for any trace, any whisper of human scent. Unlike Mac, Ranger's determination seemed unwavering, his focus absolute. He was a creature of instinct and unwavering loyalty, qualities that Mac, in his human despair, envied. "Anything, boy?" Mac murmured, his voice hoarse from the cold, the words snatched away by the wind. Ranger's tail gave a single, almost imperceptible wag, a sign of continued effort, but nothing more. They had covered miles of treacherous terrain, the familiar hiking trails now erased by the blizzard's fury, replaced by an undulating landscape of pristine, deadly white. The thought of a small child, out here alone, battling this unforgiving storm, was a torment Mac struggled to contain. His own daughter, a vibrant 5-year-old with a laugh like wind chimes, flashed in his mind, fueling his desperate drive. Suddenly, Ranger's head snapped up. His ears swiveled, his body tensed, and a low, urgent whine rumbled deep in his chest. He stopped abruptly, his powerful frame a sudden anchor in the swirling snow. His nose pointed directly into the blinding white curtain ahead. "What is it, boy?" Mac's heart leaped, a surge of adrenaline cutting through his bone-deep fatigue. He struggled to catch up, his heady boots sinking deep into the drifts. Ranger let out a sharp, decisive bark, a sound that cut through the howl of the wind, demanding immediate attention. He began to dig furiously, his powerful paws scooping away mounds of snow with surprising speed. Mac dropped to his knees, his gloved hands joining Ranger's efforts. The snow was packed, icy, resisting their frantic movements. Moments later, his hand brushed against something soft, fragile. A gasp escaped his lips. He pushed harder, scooping away the last of the snow, his breath catching in his throat. Curled into a tiny ball, nestled against the base of a snow-laden pine, was Lily. Her small body was almost entirely covered, a thin layer of hoarfrost clinging to her eyelashes. Her skin was a ghostly pale, tinged with the ominous blue of severe hypothermia. She was barely breathing, her chest rising and falling with agonizing slowness. Her eyes, wide and unfocused, blinked weakly at the swirling snow. "Lily!" Mac cried, his voice choked with relief and terror. He carefully scooped her up, cradling her fragile body against his chest, trying to impart what little warmth he had left. Her limbs were stiff, her fingers like icy twigs. He fumbled for his radio, his gloved fingers clumsy with urgency. "We've got her. Target located. Lily's alive. Repeat, Lily's alive. Requesting immediate medical extraction. Coordinates." As he spoke, Lily stirred weakly in his arms. Her eyelids fluttered open, her gaze unfocused, but then, with a profound effort, her eyes slowly, deliberately, found Ranger. The German shepherd, his fur matted with snow, was nuzzling her face, a low, comforting whine emanating from his throat. His usually alert eyes were soft, filled with a gentle concern that seemed almost human. Lily's lips, chapped and blue, parted slightly. Her voice was barely a whisper, a mere puff of breath lost in the vastness of the blizzard, but Mac, holding her so close, heard it. She looked at Ranger, her gaze unwavering, and her tiny, frozen voice, filled with an ancient, unbearable sorrow, articulated words that would forever haunt Mac. "They said it was my fault." The words hung in the icy air, a chilling accusation that seemed to defy the innocent face of a 7-year-old child. Mac froze, his breath catching. Whose fault? What was her fault? The implications were horrifying. A sudden dark shadow cast over the desperate relief of finding her alive. He felt Ranger stiffen against his side, a low growl rumbling deep in his chest, his eyes fixed on something beyond Mac's immediate perception. The German shepherd, usually so focused on the rescue, now refused to budge from Lily's side, his massive body a protective barrier against the biting wind. He was not merely a rescue dog anymore. He was a silent guardian, an unyielding presence. And in that moment, the desperate search for a lost child transformed into something far more sinister, a chilling mystery that Ranger, with his loyal, unwavering instincts, was determined to unravel. The blizzard might conceal truths, but this canine dog wouldn't let them stay hidden. The medical helicopter arrived a harrowing 20 minutes later, its rotors whipping the snow into a blinding vortex. The paramedics, grim-faced and efficient, immediately took over Lily's care. Her core temperature was dangerously low, her vital signs barely registering. As they gently transferred her to the stretcher, Ranger, uncharacteristically, nudged her arm with his nose, a soft whine escaping him. He then turned his head, his gaze piercing, holding Mac's eyes with an intensity that demanded attention. He let out a sharp, insistent bark, then trotted a few paces away, looking back expectantly. "Ranger, no! We need to get her to the hospital," Mac urged, his voice strained with urgency. He made a move to follow the paramedics, but Ranger let out a guttural growl, a sound Mac rarely heard from his usually disciplined partner. The German shepherd refused to follow the stretcher. Instead, he pawed at the snow, then looked back at Mac, his eyes blazing with an undeniable purpose. Mac paused, a shiver, not from the cold, running down his spine. Ranger was never this insistent without a reason. That whisper, "They said it was my fault," echoed in his mind, chilling him to the bone. The dog's unusual behavior, his absolute refusal to leave, was a stark counterpoint to the relief of finding Lily. It spoke volumes, a silent language only Mac, after years of working with him, could truly understand. All right, boy," Mac conceded, a knot of unease tightening in his stomach. He nodded to the lead paramedic. "I'll be right behind you. Ranger's got something." He knew the risk he was taking, potentially delaying his own return to base. But his trust in Ranger was absolute, a bond forged in countless life-or-death situations. Ranger let out a series of sharp, urgent barks, then turned and plunged into the deeper drifts, moving with a relentless, determined gait. Mac followed, struggling to keep pace, his body aching from fatigue and the biting cold. The blizzard still raged, but Ranger seemed impervious to its fury, his powerful legs churning through the snow, his nose to the ground, pulling Mac deeper into the untouched wilderness. They walked for what felt like an eternity, the desolate landscape offering no landmarks, only an endless expanse of swirling white. Mac's flashlight beam cut a narrow swath through the gloom, illuminating dancing snowflakes. He questioned his sanity, his exhaustion playing tricks on his mind. Had he misread Ranger? Was the dog simply disoriented by the storm? But then, Ranger let out a low growl, a different kind of sound this time, one of warning. Ahead, barely discernible through the swirling snow, a faint, dark shape began to emerge. As they drew closer, The shape resolved into a small, rustic cabin, its wooden walls almost entirely swallowed by snowdrifts. A plume of thin, almost invisible smoke curled from its chimney, quickly dispersed by the wind. No light shone from its windows, which were dark, uninviting rectangles against the white. "A cabin?" Mac muttered, his brow furrowing. This was unexpected. They were deep in an isolated, rarely traversed section of the mountain. Why would Lily have wandered here? Or had she not wandered at all? The thought sent a fresh wave of unease through him. Ranger, however, did not hesitate. He bounded forward, his powerful frame a blur of motion, heading straight for the cabin door. He stopped abruptly at the front door, his powerful German Shepherd nose pressed against the rough-hewn wood. He let out a sharp, furious bark, then began to scratch frantically at the door, his claws tearing at the aged timber. The door, Mac noticed, was locked, secured with a heavy rusted padlock. "Ranger, what is it?" Mac asked, his voice low, a sense of dread coiling in his stomach. He knelt beside the dog, examining the padlock. It was old, but sturdy. He tried the handle. It was unyielding. Ranger, meanwhile, had begun to whine, a deep, mournful sound, punctuated by agitated barks. He sniffed at the base of the door, then scratched again, his insistence almost frantic. Mac pulled out his multi-tool, his gloved fingers fumbling with the various attachments. The padlock was stubborn, but with a grunt of effort, he managed to twist and pry at the old metal until, with a satisfying snap, it broke. He pushed the door open, a gust of icy wind immediately sweeping into the cabin, carrying with it the faint, stale scent of wood smoke and something else, something cloying and unpleasant, a scent he couldn't quite place. The interior was cloaked in near darkness, illuminated only by the weak beam of Mac's flashlight. It was a single, sparsely furnished room, dominated by a cold stone fireplace and a rickety wooden table. Dirty dishes were piled in a corner, and a few tattered blankets lay strewn on a makeshift bed. But it was not the clutter that caught Mac's attention. His flashlight beam swept across the room, catching on a series of unsettling details. A small, child-sized jacket, too thin for a blizzard, lay crumpled on the floor near the fireplace. Next to it, a child's worn shoe, its laces untied. And then, he saw it. On the wooden table, amidst the dirty dishes, lay a crude, handwritten note. The handwriting was shaky, clearly that of a child, but the words were stark, chillingly clear. "I'm sorry. They said I was bad." Mac felt a cold dread settle in his stomach, a feeling far deeper than the icy wind. The note, the single shoe, the child's inadequate jacket, all screamed a story far more sinister than a lost child. He remembered Lily's whispered words. They said it was my fault, it was all connected. And Ranger, meanwhile, was no longer barking. He had moved to the back wall of the cabin, his nose pressed against a section of rough-hewn timber, a low, ominous growl rumbling in his chest. He was sniffing intently, then pawing at the wood, his gaze fixed on Mac, his eyes urging him to investigate further. The atmosphere in the cabin, once merely cold, now felt oppressive, heavy with unspoken secrets. The blizzard outside might have been a white curtain, but it was clear that within these walls, a much darker storm had raged. The air inside the cabin was stagnant, thick with a disturbing blend of stale wood smoke, unwashed dishes, and a faint, acrid scent that Mac couldn't quite identify, yet instinctively recoiled from. Ranger's persistent growl, low and menacing, focused Mac's attention on the section of wall where the German Shepherd was pawing. It was a crude, unfinished part of the cabin, constructed from roughly hewn logs. As Mac shined his flashlight closer, he noticed a faint discoloration on the timber, a dark, almost sticky residue, barely visible in the dim light. He knelt, his gloved hand reaching out to touch it, then pulled back sharply. The residue felt viscous, unsettling. He brought his gloved hand closer to his nose, sniffing cautiously. The acrid scent was stronger here, almost chemical. "What is it, boy?" Mac murmured, his voice tight with apprehension. Ranger pressed his nose firmly against the timber again, then let out a sharp, decisive bark, looking at Mac as if urging him to act. The dog then began to scratch furiously at the bottom of the wall, revealing a loose floorboard. Mac's heart hammered in his chest. His instincts, honed by years of police work, screamed that something was terribly wrong. He pulled out his pry bar from his pack, inserted the tip into the gap in the loose floorboard, and with a grunt of effort, managed to lift it. Beneath the floorboard was a small, cramped space, perhaps a foot deep, dark and uninviting. As Max shone his flashlight into the cavity, a chill that had nothing to do with the blizzard seeped into his bones. Stuffed haphazardly into the dark space were several items: a child's worn backpack, a small, grimy blanket, and a crudely fashioned wooden doll. But it was what lay beneath them that sent a wave of nausea through him. A cluster of empty, unlabeled pill bottles, some crushed, others merely scattered, lay nestled amongst the debris. The acrid scent, now overwhelmingly strong, emanated from them. It was a chemical odor, vaguely medicinal, yet sinister in its context. Beside the bottles, a stained rag, stiff and dark. Mac's gaze then fell upon a small metal box, its lid partially ajar. He leaned in closer, his flashlight beam illuminating its contents. A single, tarnished silver locket, a child's drawing of a stick figure family, and a folded piece of paper. He carefully, meticulously, removed the paper. It was a child's drawing, colored in bright, optimistic crayons, depicting a family holding hands under a smiling sun. But on the reverse side, scrawled in a shaky, almost desperate hand, were a few words. "He says I ruin everything. She cries because of me." Mac felt a cold, hard knot form in his stomach. The words echoed Lily's whisper. "They said it was my fault." It painted a terrifying picture, a narrative of psychological abuse, of a small child burdened with immense, misplaced guilt. The empty pill bottles, the hidden space, the child's drawing with its heartbreaking message, all pointed to a story far darker than a simple runaway. Ranger, meanwhile, was panting softly, his eyes fixed on the revealed cavity, a low whine rumbling in his throat, as if confirming the grim truth of the discovery. Mac's mind raced. He pulled out his satellite phone, the signal weak but present. He needed backup, and he needed it now. The blizzard might be raging, but a more insidious storm had unfolded within these four walls. "This is Sergeant Macmillan," he barked into the phone, his voice strained. "I've located a cabin. Coordinates sent. Evidence of a potential child endangerment, possible abuse, requesting immediate police and forensic teams. And a medic, just in case. The child, Lily, was found. Hypothermic, but she made a chilling statement." He recounted the whisper. "They said it was my fault, and the discovery of the note and the pill bottles." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. Then his dispatcher's voice, grim and shaken, confirmed the immediate deployment of resources. Mac knew it would take hours, perhaps even most of the day, for a full team to reach them through the whiteout. He and Ranger were alone in this chilling discovery, guardians of a dark secret. He carefully replaced the floorboard, attempting to disturb as little as possible. Ranger, however, remained agitated. He moved to the cold stone fireplace, sniffing intently at the rough stones, then pawing at them. His growl intensified, a new urgency in his movements. "What now, boy?" Mac asked, his voice weary, but sharp with renewed focus. Ranger responded by letting out a sharp bark, then nudging a loose stone near the hearth. Mac knelt, his flashlight beam illuminating the area. The stone was indeed loose, easily dislodged. Behind it, a small, hollow space. Inside, tucked away, was a single worn leather-bound journal. It was old, its pages yellowed with age, its cover soft with use. Mac hesitated for a moment. Then, driven by a desperate need for answers, he pulled it out. The journal felt heavy in his hands, imbued with untold stories. He flipped it open to a random page, his eyes scanning the faded ink. The handwriting was neat, precise, yet the words themselves painted a picture of increasing despair and cruelty. "She cries again. His temper is worsening. Says it's her fault, her very presence brings trouble. The child hides her tears, Blames herself for everything. My heart aches. The entry was undated, but the implication was clear. It spoke of a cycle of abuse, a pattern of misplaced blame, and a chilling emotional manipulation. It seemed to confirm his darkest fears. This wasn't just a child lost in a blizzard. This was a child trapped in a nightmare, fleeing from an unseen terror. He continued to flip through the journal, catching glimpses of other entries. The cough, always the cough. He says it's an act, that she does it to annoy him. Forces her to stay outside, even in the cold, to breathe the fresh air, but I see the shivering, the pale lips. Another entry spoke of the pills forced upon the child to make her quiet, to make her compliant. The fragments painted a horrifying portrait of deliberate neglect and psychological torment, all masked by an insidious narrative of the child's own culpability. Mac felt a surge of cold fury. Lily's whispered words, "They said it was my fault," now resonated with a devastating clarity. "I'm sorry. They said I was bad." Note on the table, the empty pill bottles, the hidden diary entries, all converged into a horrifying tapestry of calculated cruelty. Someone had deliberately inflicted this torment on Lily, had convinced her that she was the cause of her own suffering. He closed the journal, his hands trembling. The blizzard outside seemed less terrifying than the darkness he had uncovered within these walls. Ranger, sensing Mac's distress, nudged his hand with his nose, a soft, comforting presence. The loyal German shepherd had not only found Lily, he had led Mac to the chilling evidence that explained her desperate flight. The true rescue, Mac realized, was not just from the snow, but from the insidious psychological prison Lily had been trapped in. He knew, with a grim certainty, that the fight to bring justice to this little girl had only just begun. The blizzard had revealed a hidden cabin, and within that cabin, a profound injustice waited to be brought to light. Hours crawled by, each minute feeling like an eternity within the claustrophobic confines of the snowbound cabin. Mac, despite the gnawing cold and the rising anxiety, meticulously documented everything. He took photographs of the hidden space beneath the floorboard, the empty pill bottles, the child's backpack, and the heartbreaking drawing. He carefully bagged the journal, the stained rag, and the silver locket, each item a silent testament to Lily's ordeal. Ranger remained close, his keen senses constantly scanning the cabin, his presence a comforting anchor in the chilling silence. The storm outside continued its relentless assault, effectively sealing them off from the world, deepening the sense of isolation and the grim reality of their discovery. Mac's mind replayed Lily's whisper, "They said it was my fault," over and over. He thought of his own daughter, tucked safely in her warm bed, and a fierce protective rage simmered within him. How could anyone inflict such cruelty on a child? To systematically break their spirit, to burden them with such immense, misplaced guilt. The journal entries offered fragmented glimpses into a world of emotional manipulation and neglect, chilling in their casual cruelty. The cough that was dismissed as an act, the forced outdoor exposure, the pills administered to silence her, all pointed to a calculated pattern of abuse that went far beyond mere physical harm. This was a psychological torture designed to dismantle a child's sense of self-worth. He tried to distract himself, reviewing his mental notes, preparing for the arrival of the police and forensic teams. But the cabin, with its oppressive stillness, seemed to amplify the disturbing atmosphere. Ranger, sensing his partner's deep distress, nudged Mac's hand with his wet nose, a soft whimper escaping him. Mac reached down, stroking the dog's head, drawing comfort from the loyal, unwavering presence. As the sun began its slow, almost imperceptible descent, painting the swirling snow in hues of gray and violet, Mac heard it. A faint, distant drone, growing steadily louder. The sound of an approaching snowmobile. Relief, sharp and visceral, washed over him. Help was finally on its way. A few minutes later, the roar of the engine died down, and the familiar crunch of heavy boots on packed snow signaled the arrival of the first responders. Two figures emerged from the whiteout, bundled in heavy snow gear, their faces grim. Detective Amelia Hayes, a sharp, no-nonsense investigator, known for her meticulous attention to detail and unwavering pursuit of justice, led the way. Behind her was another canine officer, a younger man named Officer Jensen, with his own German Shepherd Storm, a younger, more boisterous dog. "Mac! Thank God!" Hayes's voice was filled with a mix of relief and urgency. Her eyes, though tired, were sharp, immediately assessing the grim scene. "We got your call. Lily's vitals are stabilizing, but she's still critical. What exactly did you find?" Mac, his body stiff from the cold and prolonged kneeling, stood up. He quickly, concisely, recounted his discovery. Lily's whisper, Ranger's insistence, the locked cabin, the hidden floorboard, the pill bottles, the child's drawing, and the journal. He handed Hayes the carefully bagged evidence, his voice devoid of emotion, presenting the facts with the clinical detachment of a seasoned officer, even as his heart ached for the little girl. Hayes listened, her expression growing increasingly grim with each detail. Her eyes, usually calm and composed, narrowed with a cold fury as she examined the journal entries. "My God," she breathed, her voice barely a whisper, a rare display of raw emotion from the hardened detective. "This is sickening." She looked at Ranger, her gaze filled with a profound respect. "Good boy, Ranger. You saved that child twice over." Jensen, meanwhile, had begun to examine the cabin. Storm, his own K9, sniffed around cautiously, but it was Ranger who remained agitated, pacing near the back wall, sniffing repeatedly at the corner near the fireplace where the journal had been found. He let out another low growl, a rumble of warning that caught Hayes's attention. "What is it, Ranger?" Hayes asked, her voice calm, recognizing the dog's persistent distress. Ranger whined, then pawed at the stone hearth again, his nose pressed against a faint crack in the masonry. Hayes knelt, shining her own powerful flashlight on the area. The masonry seemed solid enough, but following Ranger's insistent gaze, she noticed a subtle discoloration, a faint, almost invisible stain on the rough stone. She ran her gloved finger over it, then brought it closer to her nose. A faint, metallic tang. Blood. Mac's breath hitched. A fresh wave of dread washed over him, colder than the blizzard. The journal, the pill bottles, the psychological torment, and now, this. The scope of the abuse was far greater than he had initially imagined. "Jensen, get a forensic kit over here, carefully," Hayes instructed, her voice low and precise, devoid of any emotional tremor now, replaced by grim determination. "Mac, tell me everything about this journal, every detail you read, every feeling it gave you." As Mac recounted the chilling entries, Hayes and Jensen, using specialized forensic tools, began to meticulously process the seam. They found more than just the faint bloodstain. Behind the loosened stone, deeper in the wall, they uncovered a small, hidden compartment. Inside, wrapped in a piece of faded cloth, lay a single, tarnished silver ring, too large for Lily's small fingers, but unmistakably a child's ring. And next to it, a small, intricate carving of a bird, made from a piece of weathered wood. Both items seemed to hum with a silent, tragic story, items of profound personal significance to the child, hidden away from prying, cruel eyes. "These are probably hers," Hayes murmured, holding up the tiny, crude wooden bird. Something she cherished, hidden away from those who would take it from her. Her voice was soft, laced with a quiet fury. The discovery solidified the grim narrative of a child systematically deprived of comfort, of self-expression, of any sense of security. The forensic team, finally battling their way through the deepening snow, arrived hours later. The cabin became a hive of activity, masked figures moving with purpose, documenting, collecting, preserving every piece of evidence. The air, once heavy with an unseen dread, now buzzed with the stark reality of a criminal investigation. Mac and Ranger were debriefed, their account meticulously recorded. Ranger's role in finding Lily, and then in leading Mac to the crucial evidence, was hailed as extraordinary. He was given a hero's welcome, lavished with praise and treats, though he remained unusually subdued, his focus still on the dark secrets the cabin had revealed. Later that evening, after the last of the forensic team had left the cabin, its secrets now exposed to the harsh light of justice, Mac found himself back at the station, filling out reports. Hayes approached him, a grim expression on her face. "We ran the numbers on those pill bottles, Mac," she said, her voice low. "Benzodiazepines. In dosages far too high for a child. And the blunt stain is recent. Human. We're still running DNA, but—" She trailed off, her meaning clear. The abuse was not just psychological, it was physical and potentially lethal. "We're going to put out an all-points bulletin for anyone who might have had access to Lily. Her grandparents, her extended family. Anyone who knew about her living arrangements. This is going to be a tough one. The psychological damage to that child." She shook her head, her face etched with a mix of anger and despair. Mac looked at Ranger, who was lying quietly at his feet, his gaze fixed on nothing in particular, his presence a silent sentinel. The German shepherd had done his part. He had found Lily, and he had pulled back the curtain on a horrifying truth. But Mac knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the true fight for Lily's healing, for her justice, had only just begun. The blizzard might have ended, but the shadows of the cabin, and the chilling words of a little girl, would haunt them all until justice was served. The medical team at Whisper Peak Hospital worked tirelessly, their dedicated efforts slowly coaxing Lily back from the precipice of severe hypothermia. She was stabilized, her small body responding to the warmth and care, but her mind remained a locked vault. She drifted in and out of consciousness, her fragile grip on reality tenuous. When she was awake, her eyes held a vacant, faraway look, and she spoke little. Her words, when they came, fragmented and filled with an unsettling resignation. The trauma, both physical and psychological, had taken a heavy toll. Mac visited her regularly, sitting by her bedside, often with Ranger quietly curled at his feet. The German shepherd, in an unusual deviation from his strict training, was allowed in her room. The nurses had witnessed the calming effect his presence had on Lily. Ranger would rest his head gently on the edge of her bed, his soft whines a comforting melody. Lily, when conscious, would often reach out a tiny, hesitant hand to stroke his fur, a faint flicker of peace crossing her features. It was a silent, powerful connection, a testament to the animal's intuitive understanding of her pain. Meanwhile, Detective Hayes's investigation moved with relentless efficiency. The DNA from the bloodstain in the cabin confirmed it belonged to Lily. The analysis of the pill bottles revealed they contained a powerful sedative, a benzodiazepine commonly used for severe anxiety and insomnia, and highly dangerous for children, especially in the dosages found. The chilling contents of the journal, coupled with the hidden items in Lily's fragile state, painted a damning picture of sustained abuse and emotional torment. The focus of the investigation quickly narrowed to Lily's legal guardians, her aunt, Clara Sterling, and her husband, Gareth Sterling. Lily's parents had passed away in a tragic accident 2 years prior, and the Sterlings, her closest living relatives, had been granted custody. They lived in a secluded, affluent home on the outskirts of Whisper Peak, a seemingly respectable couple with no prior criminal record. The community viewed them as pillars, their generosity and quiet lifestyle masking a far darker reality. Hayes orchestrated a meticulous, coordinated approach. While some officers gathered evidence at the Sterling residence, ensuring legal protocols were strictly adhered to, Hayes herself, accompanied by Mac and Ranger, went to conduct the initial interviews. The blizzard had finally broken, leaving behind a world sparkling under a brilliant cold sun, but the air remained heavy with the chill of winter and the pervasive tension of the unfolding investigation. The Sterling home was an imposing structure, grand and isolated, a stark contrast to the rustic cabin. When Clara Sterling, a woman with a deceptively gentle smile and nervous eyes, opened the door, her demeanor shifted abruptly when she saw Hayes, Mac, and Ranger. Her initial feigned concern for Lily quickly dissolved into a brutal defensiveness. Gareth Sterling, a burly man with a perpetually stern expression, emerged from the living room, his gaze immediately narrowing on Ranger, a flicker of something akin to fear in his eyes. "Detective Hayes, Sergeant Macmillan." "What a surprise," Gareth said, his voice clipped, laced with an unnerving politeness that did little to mask the underlying hostility. To what do we owe this visit? Is Lily all right? Has she spoken? Hayes's expression remained impassive, her voice calm but firm. Mr. Sterling, Miss Sterling, we'd like to ask you a few questions regarding Lily's disappearance and recent discoveries. She omitted any mention of the cabin or the evidence, observing their reactions. Clara wrung her hands. We told you everything. She's a difficult child, prone to dramatics. She ran away, we assume, after a disagreement. She avoided eye contact with Ranger, whose gaze was fixed on Gareth, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Gareth's eyes flickered nervously towards Ranger. Why is that dog here? He demanded, his voice hardening. We don't appreciate animals in our home. Ranger is part of the rescue team, Mr. Sterling. Mac interjected, his voice low, his eyes never leaving Gareth's face. He played a crucial role in locating Lily. Hayes then cut to the chase, her voice sharpening. We found a cabin, Mr. and Miss Sterling. A very particular cabin, with a locked door, and inside, we found certain items. Items that suggest Lily did not simply run away after a disagreement. Why? A subtle shift in Gareth's posture, a tightening of his jaw. Clara's face, drained of color. A cabin? Clara stammered, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know what you're talking about. We found a journal, Ms. Sterling, Hayes continued, her voice gaining an edge of steel. Handwritten entries detailing neglect, abuse, and the systematic psychological torment of the child. Entries that speak of the pills and a child being blamed for ruining everything. Gareth's face contorted, a mask of anger replacing his forced politeness. That child is manipulative, a liar. She exaggerates everything. He blustered, his voice rising, a vein throbbing in his temple. She's always been a burden since her parents passed, always causing trouble. At his outburst, Ranger let out a sharp, furious bark, a guttural sound that startled everyone. He lunged forward, straining against Mac's leash, his eyes fixed on Gareth, a terrifying display of protective aggression. His hackles were raised, a menacing growl rumbling deep in his chest. It was a raw, visceral reaction, a testament to the profound connection he had forged with Lily, and his instinctive recognition of her tormentor. Ranger, down, Mac commanded, his voice firm, struggling to control the powerful dog, but not entirely wishing to quell his protective instincts. Ranger obeyed, but his eyes never left Gareth, a silent, powerful accusation. Gareth, clearly unnerved by the dog's ferocity, stumbled back a step. Clara, meanwhile, burst into tears, her facade crumbling. It was Gareth. He said she was difficult. He said the pills would make her quiet. He locked her in there sometimes, when she was bad. Her words tumbled out in a frantic, desperate torrent, a confession fueled by fear and guilt. Hayes's expression remained unwavering. And you, Miss Sterling? You allowed this? You participated? Clara sobbed, her shoulders shaking. I was scared. He has a terrible temper. He said it was for her own good, to teach her discipline. Her voice was a pathetic whimper, a stark contrast to the strength and resilience Lily had displayed simply by surviving. At that moment, the rest of the police team arrived, their vehicles crunching on the gravel driveway. The Sterlings were taken into custody, their initial denials quickly crumbling under the weight of the evidence and Clara's desperate confession. Later that week, Lily, still fragile but showing remarkable resilience, began to speak more coherently. She recounted fragments of her ordeal, her small voice trembling as she described the loneliness of the cabin, the fear of the bad pills, and the crushing weight of being told she was bad, that everything was her fault. She spoke of the bitter cold, the gnawing hunger, and the overwhelming fear of being alone. But she also spoke of Ranger, of his warm fur, his gentle nudges, his comforting presence. She called him her snow angel, the one who wouldn't let her die. The community of Whisper Peak was shattered by the revelations. The Sterlings, once respected figures, were now reviled, their dark secret exposed to the harsh light of justice. The town rallied around Lily, offering an outpouring of support, love, and practical assistance. Foster families came forward, offering safe, loving homes. Child psychologists offered their expertise, dedicated to helping Lily heal from the deep wounds inflicted upon her. Ranger, true to his nature, remained Lily's silent guardian. He visited her daily at the hospital, and later, at her new foster home. Their bond, forged in the crucible of a blizzard and the chilling revelations of abuse, remained unbreakable. He was her anchor, her protector, the one creature who had seen her despair and refused to abandon her. Mac, watching Lily slowly begin her long journey of healing, felt a profound sense of purpose. He saw the resilience in her small, brave spirit, the spark of life that had refused to be extinguished. He knew that the path ahead for her would be long and challenging, but she was not alone. She had a community that loved her, dedicated professionals committed to her recovery, and a loyal German shepherd who had, quite literally, saved her life, not once, but twice. The blizzard had been a storm of snow and ice, but it had also been a tempest that unveiled a hidden darkness, allowing light and healing to finally break through. The whisper of a little girl had revealed a chilling truth, and a canine dog, with unwavering loyalty, had ensured that justice would prevail.